The Netherlands, one of Europe's most attractive countries for international students, is now facing major university funding cuts. But students and faculty are not staying silent. They are taking it to the streets.
Because we are very concerned about the severe budget cuts that the government is imposing on the Dutch higher education sector. So that means less funding for research, less funding for teaching. And second, we are very concerned about the law on internationalization and balance that aims to decrease the number of international students and also aims to switch bachelor programs in Dutch universities to Dutch.
It's just a really big problem. If you cut on education, you cut on knowledge, and the only thing we have is knowledge.
And these budget cuts are going to make education more expensive and less accessible to regular people. So that's why we're fighting here today.
The new cabinet wants to hurt universities because they don't think that they are in line with their values.
Both measures, the financial measures and the language measures on international students, are very damaging for the reputation of the Dutch higher education sector.
Hello and welcome to a new edition of the show that is called Strange Times. As the reality indicates, we are living through very weird moments. I'm your host, Leopoldo Pérez Obregón, and I'm here to walk you through the very complexities of this moment. Titanic task, but at least we are here to think together through this moment. Today we are breaking down a topic that is very close to my heart in a way, because I myself have studied in the Netherlands, and I must say straight away that I'm not entirely impartial in this debate. However, I will do my best to portray this argument to its full complexity. Coincidentally, I recently visited the Netherlands, and I was in Maastricht the day where one of the protests to push back on these measures were held. So I gathered some testimonies on the ground that we are going to listen to right now. Then I'm going to briefly comment on the historical origins of the Dutch higher education system, because otherwise we cannot really understand where this backlash comes from, followed by some comments on the talking points and the rationale of the government behind these policy measures, and we are going to finalize with a testimony from an expert on migration topics, because honestly this cutting funds of universities is just the tip of the iceberg of a larger debate that hinges upon nationalistic politics, language and culture debates, migration and housing, among other issues. So let's start by hearing from Carline van Breugel, who is the head of marketing and communications from the AOB, which is the Algemene Onderwijsbond, the General Education Union of the Netherlands. And I was also very surprised to learn that she was a former member of the Dutch parliament, because she's very young, to be honest. I learned this after the fact while putting together this material, because during that day, they gave me a hat of the AOB, and I just talked to somebody from the organization like, hey, can I ask you some questions? And they redirected me. They told me, she's the big boss, you can talk to her. And she was the big boss in the sense that tons of charisma. She was leading the mobilization with great dancing moves.
What impact do you think this can have for Maastricht University or the city of Maastricht or even the Netherlands as a whole?
People are losing their jobs, teachers, but also other people in education. Students, especially international students, will have a harder time to get here to study, to finish their studies. And for a whole, as a country, it's just a really big problem. If you cut on education, you cut on knowledge. And the only thing we have is knowledge. We don't have coal, we don't have all that stuff. So we need our knowledge.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the hat as well. Now I'm branded with you as well, and I really feel much part of this, and I really appreciate that you do this. It's so important. Is there a final message that you would like to send to educational staff or students?
So right now we have good education because everyone fought for it. We need to fight for it now, otherwise we will lose it. So even if you're not currently working in education, stand here, stay strong, because together we can stand against this cabinet and against these cuts.
So that was Carline van Breugel, ladies and gentlemen. I'm gonna also leave you the social media profiles of her in the description of this video in case you'd like to follow what she's doing, because we are hungry for youth leadership here in Europe and everywhere, to be honest. Now we are going to hear from Janousch Prinz, who is the spokesperson for the grassroots organization WOinActie in Maastricht, and this is how he explained what was happening in the country.
It's a very hostile climate. So a grassroots organization called WOinActie, sprung into action and started to organize what we might call like a relay strike in different university cities. And we're now about the 12th station on this relay.
Oh, that's a massive tour. And how would you explain the situation from somebody that is not necessarily involved in the political debates? Because it's so difficult to understand, like, why would you cut on education of all things?
Yeah, that's a good question. The Netherlands also has a history of investing in education, and that's because it knows that education, for each euro you invest in education, you get several back in economic growth and activity. It's just that the new cabinet wants to hurt universities because they don't think that they are in line with their values. This new cabinet wants to open a new, page of Dutch nationalism, and in that way reduce the amount of international exchange, and also invest, rather in international shareholders instead of international students. And that, to me, seems to be a really weird choice, because if you're saying to us international people aren't welcome because they don't contribute enough, but then you give tax presents to international shareholders, to me that's entirely contradictory.
That was Janousch Prinz, a very central person in organizing this mobilization. We thank him also for his words. And another important fact to highlight from this mobilization was that the president of Maastricht University herself was joining the strike, and she was heading even the walk through the city in support of the staffs and the students that were suffering these measures.
Onderzoekers, onze hoogleraren, ons ondersteunend personeel hard moeten werken om onze generaties nu en in de toekomst blijvend op te leiden, dan durf je bijna niet nog een extra inzet te vragen. En toch is het nodig dat we hier vandaag staan, dat we hier volgende week staan, dat we net zo lang ons geluid laten horen, tot ze in Den Haag begrijpen dat investeren in onderwijs en onderzoek loont en geen kostenpost is. Dus nog één keer, doe het niet! Doe het niet! Doe het niet!
This is the message that she had to send to the students.
Also for Dutch students, there's a high risk that if this law will be implemented, it will also affect the quality of higher education for Dutch students. So that's also why I'm happy that everyone is here today, to raise your voice, stand up for higher education, and know that investing in higher education is not a cost, it's a profit and a benefit for society, both economically and societally.
So now I'd like to take a step back and comment on the historical origins of this higher education model. I brought here some notes. One important milestone to mention is the Bologna reforms. That was a process under which the Netherlands and other EU countries restructured their educational programs to foster mobility across the Eurozone. The Netherlands was particularly successful in this effort because they also pursued an active policy to internationalize their education and attract talent, to such a degree that in 2023 there were around 85,000 international students attending the Netherlands, so that's about 1 in 4 according to a news site called DUB, which is an independent news site from Utrecht University community. And in some universities, such as Maastricht University, that number is even higher. Apparently, 59% of the total pool of students. I will leave you the link of this article also in the description in case you'd like to know more. And the problem is that this massive growth was not coupled with an equal level of investment. So, in real terms, from the year 2000 until 2021, investment per student dropped 20%. Another key structural factor that explains this model is the funding structure of universities in the Netherlands. Under this model, the more they recruit, the more money they get. This is also an incentive for them to grow endlessly. In 2023, measures were already more radical. The Dutch government, which was then a center-right coalition, more right than center. They formulated this Balanced Internationalization Act. That is the regulation that President Letschert was commenting on at the beginning of this video. The stated goals of this regulation are to reduce pressure on housing, preserve Dutch culture, and enhance education quality. So what is the rationale of the government behind these measures? One big talking point is quality preservation. So officials warned that universities, if they keep expanding like they are, they will not be able to provide good quality of education. Now, this is surprising because in a sense the Netherlands is a victim of its own success. If you think about it in the way that the right wing likes to think it, for example, university as a private enterprise, imagine that you create a company and then you start selling so much that you need to increase your staff, create more warehouses like Amazon in its beginning, for example. Imagine if Jeff Bezos would be exploiting its workers or not creating enough infrastructure to serve the demand, and instead he will blame on the customers. That would be ridiculous, right? Like Amazon, as we know it, will not be existing. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing to have such a tremendous monster of a company. But that's a very different discussion, right? I'm not gonna go so much off topic. Another big talking point is accessibility for Dutch students. They must not be crowded out of programs and obliged to study in English against their preference. That's what the government says. However, real accessibility, in my opinion, requires social protection policies, very active policies to ensure that every student in the society, even though they are low income, they can access education. That's not achieved by kicking out international students, in my opinion. One very important talking point is the infrastructure strain, which means housing. Believe me, this is a very big one in the Netherlands. When I arrived to the country, I lived for 2 months in a boat that was called the Boatel because it was a boat and a hotel in the River Maas. There I met wonderful fellow pirates that were in the same position, and now it's funny because it passed, but at the moment, believe me, it was super stressing. So I asked a student, Ilan Feron, who was one of the students who created the MOSA, the Student Union of Maastricht, what was his take on this argument when students get blamed for the housing crisis, and I addressed the same question to President Letschert, and this is what they had to say.
It makes me very angry because it's not the international students' fault. It's the fault of the system, which provides almost no social housing, affordable places for students, and just leaves it up to the open market to decide who gets housing. It's really the system, and that's what needs to change.
That's a problem that our government made by not having long-term perspectives on housing development. And now people with an international background, be it a migrant or a refugee, an international student, gets to blame. But the blame is, of course, in governmental policy. So I would not want to put the blame on our international community for that. Now, there are some cities that do struggle. So for them, it is important to also signal to their international students, come to our universities if you have a room. In the regions like where I am, in the border regions, and they call it the declining regions in population, we don't have that problem. We don't have a housing problem. We are very proud to have such an international community, and we still have enough space for international staff and students to come. And we hope they will continue to come because we love them.
Thank you very much, President Letschert, for loving us. That was a great word choosing, and I also very much would like that every student that comes to Maastricht feels equally welcome as it was in my case. But we need to think now about what are the implications for talent attraction for the country and also for innovation. Let's remember that the Netherlands is one of the most advanced innovation hubs of the whole region. So for that, I went to talk with an expert, Melissa Siegel. She runs the migration specialization in the master's program of public policy of Maastricht University and United Nations University. This is the program that I have also completed. Not in the migration specialization. I know very little about this topic, but she does a lot. And she has a great YouTube channel that I will also link in the description of this video. There's also a larger interview with Melissa coming soon in this channel, so subscribe so you don't miss out on this. And now we're going to hear her take on what's happening in the country.
So I do have to say that the Netherlands previously has really done the right thing with internationalizing to a large extent their higher education institutions. So we see that many countries around the world, actually the ones that are thriving the most are the ones, of course, that are attracting the most international students. So you see this in the US, you see it in Canada, you see it in the UK, you see it in Australia, for example. And the Netherlands has really capitalized on this in the last several years. Why? Because their higher education institutions are top-notch and they speak English extremely well. So the Dutch are the best non-native English speakers in the world. And a lot of the higher education is taught in English because the Netherlands is a small country and they also need to make sure that they are preparing people for the globalized world, the globalized economy. And so many of the companies that are also based in the Netherlands are doing so much of their business in English. So what has this done? This has made the Netherlands a very attractive country for international students to come to it. But that also does mean that over the years, more and more and more of the education has gone to English from Dutch. And now there has started to be a backlash also within the country with discussions about, okay, are we losing our native language? Are we now training people in the country who are not able to have high-level academic discussions in Dutch and only in English anymore, right? I mean, these are honest, I would say, concerns and discussions we should be having.
Or the working class person that only speaks Dutch and then they cannot study because everything is in English. I don't know.
Sure,
I heard about that too.
I mean, yes, okay, you could say that some people maybe from different class structures or different backgrounds maybe don't feel comfortable going then onto higher education because they don't speak English as well. And honestly, most Dutch people speak English really very well, but of course this could still be some kind of barrier. I think one of the bigger issues here is really that because we have the European Union and people can go and study anywhere else, the Netherlands has become very attractive also for European students because they can come here, they can speak, they can study in English, and they pay the same tuition fees as Dutch students. So one of the discussions here is like, okay, the Dutch taxpayer is now paying to train lots of European students from other countries. Now, this is something you can't really get around because we are part of the European Union. People are allowed to go to different places. And yes, this is a bit of a tricky situation on one hand for the Netherlands, but on the other hand, you can see this as a real opportunity. People are coming to the Netherlands because it is attractive, right? Because the higher education is good. And what the Netherlands needs to think about now is not how do we stop or discourage all of these European migrants from coming to study here. What they need to think about is how we can better harness those highly skilled people that are being educated here, right? So once you're being educated in the Dutch system, you also understand the Dutch system. Maybe it does mean that this needs to be tailored a little bit more with more opportunities for international students to be learning Dutch and to be able to learn Dutch to a level where they could actually work in it later. But I think right now, what we're seeing in politics is they're taking the wrong approach. They're saying, let's try to discourage international migrants. Let's start to cap numbers. Let's try to figure out ways that we don't bring international students in. And this is the wrong approach. The right approach is, how can we best harness these brains for the Netherlands? The Netherlands is a knowledge economy. It's a service economy. These are exactly the people that are going to help the Netherlands grow and thrive, and as it does right now, punch above its weight for the size of the country.
So this is as far as we are gonna get here today with this conversation. However, my very disorganized conclusion is that I understand this willingness to not let the student inflow get out of hand, because also when you arrive to the country and you have nowhere to live, it's absolutely frustrating. And it comes a point when you ask, like, why the hell did they allow me to come here if there was no place for me? However, if the response to this is, okay, then let's just limit the inflow of internationalization, let's become more national, more tiny, more to ourselves, then you're also going to become more irrelevant. And To me, this is a shame, not only because of my own interest or the international students, but also because I think this is a wonderful country, and it's also a very important spot for innovation of the whole European region. If the Netherlands just limits students and don't do a long-term plan to embrace and keep expanding and capitalizing on the very, very, very valuable assets they gather over these years in terms of knowledge, this is not gonna go in the right direction. And I also find this argument about universities not reflecting the average sentiment of the Dutch or the people of the, the real people of whatever country, very strange. Honestly, universities are not supposed to reflect any point of view in particular, be it a majoritarian or minority type of argument, because when you go to university, you are engaged in a scientific type of creation. So that's why the scientific process is called a process and not a conclusion. As long as you arrive there and you engage with this set of rules, you can come with whatever background, and you're supposed to think freely, not think to embrace this or that perspective. I mean, if the right-wing policies are not favored, it's just not because they are right-wing, but most of the times because they are stupid. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming so far in this show. I hope to see you again here. So subscribe and see you on the next edition of the show.